We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a haunting good story. Now let's get started on today's lovely haunted Christmas. "20 years ago, Middleton, Pennsylvania was wrapped in a fresh blanket of new-fallen snow. The world seemed silent and peaceful, but the idyllic scene outside one snow-covered house belied the horror inside. The red of blood painted the walls, the floors of the wholaver family home with the 800 block of North Union Street, where the bodies of a mother and her daughters were found on Christmas Day, victims of a terrible triple murder. Only a 9-month-old baby girl would survive, and only after the unthinkable ordeal of spending more 30 hours alone with the bodies of her young mom, teenager aunt, and grandmother. This was Christmas 2002, the day a joyous holiday became for many synonymous with homicide. Shattered family, broke hearts of friends and neighbors, and shocked an entire town poised to celebration the birth of Christ. Instead, they mourned the violent, the execution-style deaths of 3 neighbors and speculated about the likely killer still on the loose. The most horrible day. Gene Wholaver. I just think it's kind of funny because the last name is Wholander. You know, Whoville, the Who's. And it's just Grinch, whatever. Ironic. Jean Wholander, 43, and her daughters, 20-year-old Victoria and Elizabeth, 15, who were due to spend Christmas Eve with family in Jonestown, but the normally punctual Jean never showed. Davis thought it was especially odd when she phoned her sister Christmas Eve night, not even Jean's answering machine picked up. She couldn't know that phone lines at the Wholander home had been cut. Jean's co-workers at Harrisburg Hospital also grew concerned when she didn't show up for her last shift before Christmas break. Their phone calls to the house went unanswered too. The following morning, a snowy Christmas day, Middletown Police Sergeant Robert W. Givler drew the call to make a welfare check at the Wholaver house. The following morning, a snowy Christmas day, Middleton Police made a welfare check at the Wholaver house. The first thing out of place was a garage door that remained open despite the snowstorm. Givler took that route to go inside. A door off the garage led to the kitchen. That's when I noticed something. There were somebody's legs laying on the floor that he testified about. The legs were Jean's. She'd been shot and left to bleed out from her head wound. As shocking as the discovery was, the crime scene would get worse. Much worse. Joined by another officer, Givler went upstairs to continue his search. There they found the bodies of the 2 Wholaver girls in their bedroom. They too had been shot, executional style. Next to the Victoria's lifeless form was her 9-month-old daughter. Mercifully, detectives in the Dauphin County Attorney's Office was called. Holiday or not, they fought through the ongoing snowstorm. The district attorney joined them just to get to the scene. Christmas would never be the same for any of them. Every Christmas morning when I wake up, I wonder, will I get another phone call to go to a crime scene as gruesome? It certainly has had its effect on me and my family, friends, and co-workers. Added Middleton Police, that was just the most horriblest day. The DA, Fran, who prosecuted the murder case as the deputy, told Penn Life he can't help out because that was a murder. There was murders every Christmas. It speaks for itself. It was just an awful scene. It's jarring. It occurred on Christmas Eve and involved a 15-year-old and left a 9-month-old child left alone in the house for a long period. It's not too hard to be thinking about. It is this time of the year. For Gene Hulamer's family, the once joyful holiday would never be the same. Christmas? That's one of the worst days of the year. Yeah, they did have an obvious suspect. Investigators needed a little time to come up with a prime suspect, which was Ernest R. Hulander Jr., Gene's 42-year-old ex-husband and father of Victoria and Elizabeth. Hulander was on Chardo's radar because he was soon to be stand trial on charges. He'd molested his daughter for years. It was no big leap year to consider that this was a motive for the murders. Chardo said he had to restrain himself and other investigators from leaping to conclusions. They followed the evidence, he said, all of which led to Hulander. Chardo's investigator would conclude Ernest Hulander killed the three out of vengeance and desire to silence them. At trial, Chardo labeled him a rapist and a murderer, a person who will stop at nothing to evade responsibility for the crimes. For his part, Hulander blamed his ex-wife for his daughter's sexual abuse allegation. In statement at an August 13, 2002 preliminary hearing of the abuse charges, Victorian described how his father once dressed her in her mother's lingerie. He would show me how to kiss. Sometimes he would make me take off my clothes and he would touch me. Victoria testified. He said, if I'd ever tell anyone, he would kill me. But it wasn't Victoria who ultimately told on her dad. It was 15-year-old Elizabeth Izzy to her family and friends. At her funeral in Johnson, Izzy was remembered as a happy-go-lucky girl who'd always wave when crossing paths in the hallways of school. Few knew her dark family life, much less the secret about her father that she finally had the courage to tell. How could Izzy have been so upbeat? Mourners were left ponder this as they struggled to come to grips with the tragedy. At the funeral, some just stared blankly at the three photographs of the victims, carefully arranged on the table of the chapel in a narrow room down the hall. Three closed caskets were lined in a row, surrounded by flowers. The reality of the murder investigation intruded upon even this final goodbye. At the last minute, a forensic expert was dispatched from Hastings to perform the more test on the bodies. The burial of three women had to be postponed for a day. Finally, when funeral services were held, there was a clear family division. All of Gene Hulamer's relatives sat on the one side of the chapel, while Ernest Hulamer's family sat on the opposite side. Feeling the next to last few, the family would keep similar sides at Ernest Hulamer's murder trial nearly 2 years later. But don't forget, there was a smoking gun. The thaw of spring 2003 brought some of the most damning evidence in the case. It was none other than Ernest Hulamer's young brother Scott who led police right to it. He admitted driving his brother to the Hulamer home early the morning of Christmas Eve. Scott maintained he did not participate in the shootings. He later struck a plea deal in return for his testimony. Scott testified that Ernest changed his clothes after returning to the truck from the Wholaver home. Then they drove to an isolated area of Clearfield country where Ernest walked into woods with the clothes and a lighter. Scott said his brother carried a long gun with him. Following the spring snow melt, Scott led investigators to the spot of the Clearfield County. There they found a .22 caliber handgun that ballistics later linked to the killings. The second gun, a shotgun, and the burned clothing also were found by the state police academy cadets who searched the woods. Investigators now had the murder weapon and a wealth of other evidence. Little did they know Ernest Hulamer harbored his own secret plot to blow up the case. Murder for hire, it shall be called. To this day, Ernest has never admitted creeping into his estranged family's home early on Christmas Eve and killing his ex-wife and daughters. He told a much different tale to the jailhouse confidant. James Meddings III, who just happened to be an informant for the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency in the story, whoever admitted being at his estranged family's house on Christmas Eve 2002. He said he was outside the home watching his ex-wife Jean through the window. That's when she suddenly dropped out of sight. Painting himself as something of a hero, whoever said he broke into the house through a garage window to find Jean on the kitchen floor, shot in the head but still clinging to life. Whoever even described her death. Jean had blood coming out of her nose and was breathing very rapidly as he reached down and felt for her pulse. Then he said he kissed her hand. Upstairs, it was said he found his 2 daughters both shot dead. A gun at 22 was left on the floor. Whoever said he picked it up, stepped it into his belt, and then fled to Clearfield County. There, whoever said he buried his clothes in a plastic bag and disposed of the gun, lest he'd been falsely accused of murder. As for who really committed the crimes, whoever said he knew that too. He pointed to his older daughter's estranged boyfriend, father of her little girl Madison. Whoever said he was determined to bring that person to justice, and his only avenue for doing so from behind bars was to hire a hitman. Madison agreed to help Hula arrange the hit and stage it as a suicide. The elaborate plan, designed to exonerate Hula, called for a suicide note to be left on the boyfriend's body, confessing to the murders. There was just one catch. The supposed hitman Meddings put whoever in touch was with an actual DEA agent who recorded all the conversations. Excuse me. Chardo, who helped oversee the wiretap, made sure the agent who posed as the hitman on the phone had a West Virginia accent. Meddings hailed from the state, so it made sense that the hitman contact would too. Those recordings played at trial still haunt Shondo, revealing just how cold-blooded a killer Hoolander was. It's all time, Charles said. It was the sound of Hoolander relieving a sigh after arranging the hit. It's the sound of a normal person makes after receiving the best of news. You can hear an excerpt of the recording, which I will explain next. The recordings in woods. That was the most jarring, him talking to the undercover agent. I want this done. I need this done. I'll take care of it, Chardo, recorded the agent as saying, "Ah, thank you," Hoolevin replied. It was a sigh of relief, an expression of joy at the killing of another human being, Chardo recalled. With that, Ernest was facing a murder for hire case in addition to the murder and sexual abuse charges. Trial for his life. Noted defense attorney Spadrow loudly proclaimed his client's innocence as the case went to trial. In August 2004, he did not molest his daughters. He did not murder his daughters. He did not murder his wife, Lapis said, all while pointing at whoever seating silently in the defense table. Lapis told jurors the molestation charges were fabricated on the part of Hoolander's daughters. As proof, he pointed to the diary entry by Elizabeth that Lapis said clearly indicated this. According to the court testify, the girls never told anyone they were abused, and there was no medical evidence corroborating the charges. If the sex crimes are bogus charges, then where's the motive for the murder? As for the murder for hire charges, Lapis pointed the picture of his distraught parent, who tried to arrange a contract order of a man he thought had killed his family. But prosecutors Chardo described as a wholly different Ernest Hoolander, a lying, manipulative, child-molesting trial murder. Chardo playing the recording of Hoolander with the supposed hitman, drawing jurors' attention to the joy in Hoolander's voice as he disguised staging a suicide that he hoped would exonerate him. Hoolander's mother, Elizabeth, admitted sending the hitman a photo of her granddaughter's ex-boyfriend along with $20 as a down payment for murder. Man, he's a cheap hitman. $20? Alright. In a recording conversation, Ernest Hoolander was heard pressing his mother to shut up his brother, Scott, who would be prosecution's star witness. On the witness stand, Elizabeth Hoolander defended her accused son to the last. When he doesn't get his way, he will often call me names, she explained. It doesn't mean he doesn't love me. And of course, there was a split verdict. After more than 50 witnesses, the verdicts were in. There'd be one final shock in the twisted story of Ernest Hoolander. The 7-man, 5-woman jury brought in from outside of Dauphin County found Hoolander, then 44, not guilty of sexual assault to his daughters. His motive for murders, according to prosecutors. Yet, the same jury found Hoolander guilty of killing his wife and daughters. He also found guilty of the murder-for-hire plot and endangering Victoria Hoolander's infant adulthood. Lapis was left confounded. How could jurors accept prosecution agreement that Hoolanders killed his family, while rejecting the theory of the motives behind the murders? We're surprised at the inconsistency of the verdicts, Lapis says. His attorney, that guy, yeah. But Chandler did not see an incongruence. The murders, he said, had eliminated all witnesses to the abuse, undercutting the part of this case. I understood it. It's hard to assess a rape case what you don't hear from the victims. We have no eyewitness to these crimes because of the defendant's murder of all his witnesses. Imagine that. In an attempt to save his own life, Hoolander spoke for the first time in court, addressing the jury that would dedicate his fate in a calm, quiet voice. He called his daughter Victoria joy to be around. He described his youngest daughter Elizabeth, as his buddy. When they accused him of molestation, he said, "I was very hurt. I love my girls. I tried to help Victoria. I couldn't believe she did that to me. I loved my wife too. I didn't shoot them." The jury didn't buy it, of course. The panel condemned him to die by lethal injection. But fighting on, in conclusion, 20 years later, Hoolander remains lodged at the State Correctional Institute in Phoenix, still fighting to stave off his execution. As part of these efforts, Hoolander demanded in court penetration that the charges he raped his daughters were expunged from his criminal record. With his records wiped clean, the motive for murders would be erased too, perhaps boosting Hoolander's chance for successful appeal. Chardo fought him on this, arguing the only reason Hoolander wasn't convicted of rape was that his victims weren't alive to testify against him. Of course. The prosecution would be gravely prejudiced if he had to retry Hoolander for the killings without being able to reference the rape cases, Chardo argued. A Dauphin Court judge agreed, rejecting Hoolander's expungement bid, but he continues to appeal the murder verdict in a death sentence. Charles said, Hoolander Prescott, who testified against him in return for a plea deal, was sentenced to 12.5 years to 25 years in prison. He's since been released and lives in central Pennsylvania. Madison, who at 9 months was the only survivor in Hoolander's murder rapist, grew up with her father, the person Hoolander had plotted from jail to kill, and his family. As an understanding, she lives with her father and is doing well, but in the internet age, there was no way to shield her from the horror of it. The 5-bedroom Dutch colonial house where the homicides took place is long gone. The property fell into sheriff's sale, where it purchased from $131,000 by Herb Moore of the Pennsylvania Properties, at the time his plan to turn into high-end residential rental. But the house, abandoned since the killings, is falling apart. The new owner razed it instead and rebuilt it. What can't be so easily swept away are all the memories of that Christmas Eve 2 decades ago. Before that morning, the Hoolander women are anticipating their family's favorite holiday and their annual Christmas Eve trip to Jonestown. Izzy, the youngest, was expectedly excited. She already knew what she was getting for Christmas. The avid family of heavy and metal headbanging Ozzy Osbourne and Iron Maiden was ready to rock out the holiday with her new electric guitar. But this, and all the millions more moments that could have filled 3 lives, were stolen away. So was some of the joy of Christmas. For all those who knew them, the holiday was never quite the same. Well, that seems to be the end of that case. So, sorry to tell y'all, but that's all. So, yeah. Y'all have a wonderful holiday. Enjoy yourself. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all the good stuff.